So the question was, are the tents, are they special for the weather, or are they just regular tents?
Yeah, they're a normal tent that you could buy at any mountaineering store, 4-season tent. Yeah, so you need a good sleeping bag. I brought my own 20 below zero sleeping bag. I rented, because you need two, because once you move one up onto the higher camps, you still need one at base camp. So I rented a second one to move up the mountain gradually, and also a 20 below. And sometimes I slept in my clothes.
Oh, yes, in the back. So how long did it take to get up Mount Everest?
Okay, so there's multiple answers here. So I left Colorado Springs on March 26th. I came home on June 1st. So that's the time frame. But you got to get there, you got to get organized in Kathmandu, you got to trek in from Lukla for 10 days, and then you're up and down the mountain. So from April 10th until May 14th, we were up and down the mountain. And then starting on May 14th, we started the summit push and summited on May 21st.
So how old were you when you started your first ascent, and how old are you today?
My first ascent of Everest? Yes. Yeah, well, my only ascent of Everest. I was 64, yeah. That's why I was the oldest guy in the group. I'm 74 now. It'll be 10 years ago on May 21st of this year. You were 64? 64, yeah. I was the oldest one in the group.
So when did you go on oxygen?
Yep.
When did you go off oxygen?
Yep. Another great question, and this has an interesting prologue to it, and that is when I was in Seattle doing my interviews, you can purchase an additional oxygen bottle if you wish. And I asked the head guy, actually, Eric Simonson. He's written a great book about because he organized the expedition that discovered Mallory's body on the north side. But anyway, I said, Eric, so what do you think? Should I purchase that extra oxygen bottle? And he says, how old are you going to be when you climb? I said, 64. And he goes, well, let me put it this way. You can either purchase it, or you can pay for another trip and purchase it that time when you don't make it this time. I said, okay, good answer. And he was spot on, because that's why I could spend the second night at Camp 4, because I had an extra bottle at the balcony waiting just in case. So I started at Camp 3 at 23,500 and slept that night at 1 liter a minute. Then I climbed at 2 liters a minute from 3 to 4, slept at 1 liter, but I didn't really sleep, rested at 1 liter a minute, climbed 2 liter a minute. For the Hillary step, Finjo came over and said, dial it up to 4 liters a minute, just because of the exertion of that. And then 2 liters coming down, replaced the third oxygen bottle at the balcony, and then slept again at 1 liter. I still had, somewhere between Camp 3 and Camp 2, I ran out. I don't know, because I still had it on. I'm just trudging along. I get there, oh, oxygen's out.
Yeah, anything special to eat?
And that's a great question, because a lot of you guys know your altitude suppresses your appetite. And so the higher you go, it really gets suppressed. And actually, my mate did not summit. There were 9 of us, 7 of us summited, and he was one that didn't. And he just totally, I think, couldn't eat enough to keep up. He just ran out of gas on summit day. And but anyway, you just have to experiment with stuff what you can eat. And I was fine up to Camp 2. I could eat anything. Camp 3, I struggled to get down a ramen packet. It's like, oh, this is awful, but I got to get it in me. Just got to do it. And in Camp 4, I did a half of a ramen trying to, but I had with me some goo. Most of you guys know that. I had some hard candies that I would stick in my cheek and just kind of let the glucose drip slowly as I'm climbing. And the other thing, you have to have it inside your pocket, inside your suit, because otherwise, if it's an outside pocket, you break a tooth because it's frozen. So it's got all that. So anyway, it's energy bars and that stuff on summit day. Before then, a pretty good diet, and the Sherpas have a great diet. It's mainly vegetarian, but periodically they'd have some meat products, but they would cook up some fantastic meals. And I could do it well up till Camp 2. Now coming down, I was so nauseated, I couldn't hardly eat anything all the way down, even on the trek out, until I got to Namche again, and then I devoured a massive meal because I was starving. Yes.
Yeah. So was there a signal to get the caches, or did you have them all downloaded on an offline list?
Yeah, well, I downloaded them to my GPS because I knew there wouldn't be a way to get it You can buy a service, and then you could, but it was really expensive then. Now it's much more reasonable because they've put up some towers and stuff in the valley. But back in 2013, you could do it really expensively or not at all. I chose not to do it, and I just had it in my GPS.
Approximately how much did it cost?
So how much does it cost? Well, again, there's a range. The way I did it, classic style Sherpa and myself, and at that time was $35,000, and that's all in. That's your permit, the paying the Sherpa, all the lodging, all the food, everything. I mean, the gear I bought along the way, but that's all in for the trek. You can actually still do even cheaper than that now because a lot of Nepalese companies have started up. But buyer beware, because they don't have a lot of backup in case of emergency, whereas the Western companies that you get your permit through, like International Mountain Guides, that's why I'm wearing the shirt. They helped me so much. I promised anytime I'd give a talk, I'd wear some of their gear. But anyway, they have a lot of, they have a satellite phone. We all had radios so we could hear each other moving up and down the mountain. And there's some great, stories about that. One of the guys that had to turn back, not Bob, but another guy, he was saying, he was struggling on the summit day, and they said, I'll make a name up so I don't reveal the guilty here. Larry, you got to turn back. Sorry, Larry. You got to turn back. Oh, no. I can make, no, Larry, we typed in your numbers into the computer. They're at base camp typing stuff in. And you'll have enough oxygen to make the top, but you'll run out sometime on the descent. Oh, okay, I'll pick up the pace. No, you're not going to be able to pick up the pace. Oh, okay, well, I'll turn the oxygen down. No, that's not going to help you. Larry, you have to turn around. And literally, what finally convinced, they said, look, Larry, you're putting not only your life, but your Sherpa's life and everybody on the team, because either life or success in jeopardy, because if we have to rescue you, nobody summits. And so he said, okay, I'm turning around. So, I mean, it's tough when he was at the South Summit. I mean, he had less than 300 feet to go vertically. But they said you're not going to have enough oxygen to get down.
Yeah, so are there people that make it to the death zone and have to turn around and they're satisfied with that, or is it summit or nothing?
That is a brilliant question, and it really is your approach. And some people, for them, it's summit or nothing, and I think that's a big mistake. And you know that from doing 14ers. That's a big mistake. In my case, I'm hiking in the Kumu Valley thinking, if I have to go home tomorrow, this is unbelievable. This is an awesome trip. Oh, I'm at base camp. Everest base camp. If I have to go home tomorrow, this has been great. Every step of the way, that was my approach. And I think that's personally the best way to look at it, is give yourself that exit option, because at some point you may have to. Just like on a 14er, here comes a storm, we got to turn around.
How did you practice the crevasse crossing?
So, as I mentioned, I'm blind in this eye. Can't really see well out of this eye. But when you have one eye, you don't have the stereoscopic vision, so you have no depth perception. So everything looks flat to me. I mean, I know this is here, but it blends into here. I could run into it and not realize it. So for the ladders, I can't tell where the ladder is versus the void below it. So I have to kind of do it by braille, kind of put the foot down. Okay, I'm on the step. Next, okay, I'm on that front points. Okay, next step, next. So I'd done a lot of things in mountaineering up before this, but I'd never done ladders. I've never done ladders before. So because of that, I said, I've got to practice this. And so in my backyard, using sawhorses, and I borrowed ladders from all my neighbors, the ones that you stand up into get on your roof, and I set up this course in my backyard. And much to my neighbor's amusement and my wife's chagrin, I would get out there with all this gear on, including the spikes, and for hours I would practice doing that. And it paid off. I mean, when I got there and those ones you saw at base camp, I'm like, oh yeah, I can do this. I know how to do this. I've practiced enough. The same thing with any big endeavor. Homework, athletics, practice makes perfect. If you practice enough perfectly, you'll do it.
Yeah. So do you still keep in contact with your Sherpa?
Still keep in contact with him. This was his 8th summit with me. He's now summited 2 more times since I was there in 2013. And yes, when we came back down to base camp, and I was, I knew he was such a great person as well as a great climber. What can I do for you? And, oh, nothing. We have everything. I said, no, I know you don't. I walked through your villages. What can I do? Finally, after 30 minutes, he's like, well, our children's education is most important. And I have 3 kids. My daughters both have sponsors to go to the private school in Kathmandu, which is the nicest school in the country. But my son, who's now, at that time was 10, I want him to go there too, but, it costs money. I said, well, how much? And he says, $1,200. Books, tuition, fees, room and board, all in for a year, $1,200. I mean, people that send kids to college here are like, what? So I said, Finjo, no problem. How'd I get it to you? Oh, you can send me a check. Where? And he writes on a piece of paper, Finjo Sherpa, Fortsey, that's his village. I said, I can't just, what I worked out with International Mountain Guides was, because he said, yeah, they know me in the valley. They'll run it up the hill to me. He said, yeah, just send a check. They'll run it up the hill to me. I said, no, Finjo, come on. So I got in touch with International Mountain Guides, and they say, we wire money there all the time. Just send it to us, make a note it's for Finjo. We'll get it to him. And sure enough, and so I started sponsoring his son, and we do it every year. And I've seen him 4 times since then. Yeah, I've been over for treks and things.
So how old were you when you decided that you were going to pursue this?
Okay, so in my mind, back when I was 13, 14, 15 years old, I'm reading everything, oh, I got to climb Everest someday. But then, I do other climbs and stuff, but marriage, kids, job, things get in the way. But then I got to where, okay, I can save enough money as possible. So a guy named Jake Norton, Colorado College graduate, was back at Colorado College giving the distinguished alumni talk. And he was on the expedition that discovered Mallory's body as well with Eric Simonson. And so after the talk, everybody's getting their books signed by him and all that. And I wait to the back end of the line. At that time, that was 2003, so I'm 54 years old. And I go up and I say, so Eric, can an old guy like me, I'm 54 years old, even consider climbing Mount Everest? And he goes, well, what have you done? And I said, well, he goes, here, sit down. He spent like 20 minutes with me, charted out, here's what you need to do, here's the steps, here's the mountains you need to progressively climb, here's the International Mountain Guides is the best outfit to go with. And yeah, so that's when I really came into focus that, okay, I've got 10 years to get this done.
How much weight did you lose from
on
the ascent and descent?
The year before, there were a couple guys in Colorado Springs that had summited Everest in 2012. And so when they had an after party, and so I went to it. I knew them casually, but not very well. And so I walked in the door, and they said, oh, you're Doug, you're going to climb next year, right? You need to gain weight. And I said, okay, sounds good. So, I mean, literally, and I know some people this makes them crazy, but I ate like a horse for a year. I gained 15 pounds, and then on the mountain I lost 20. So I was 5 pounds down from my normal by the time I got back to a scale. So essentially, yeah, you lose a lot of weight. It just takes it out of you.
What do you do about bathroom?
So you got to be careful. Obviously, at the Trek Inn and base camp, even Camp 2, they had disposable places. And if you have to go to the bathroom, I don't know if you're familiar with what's called a WAG bag. It's a bag that you can defecate in, urinate in, whatever. So you have to carry that with you, and you just can't go off the side of the trail. Now, people do and have, and that's one of the challenges that I'll address at some point. Somebody once asked about trash on Everest, but you have to carry that waste with you till you get to either 2 to drop it, or if you're coming back to base camp, and then some poor porter gets to haul those big barrels out of all that waste. But on the upper mountain, a lot of people were nervous about that at Camp 2. It's like, oh man, that would do not. I mean, for guys it's easier, and at night you have what's affectionately called a piss bottle. You have a bottle that you pee into, which and now they have for ladies called a You Go Girl. It's a funnel. You have a funnel thing that you can use, that you can in your tent. You don't have to get outside. You can just urinate. But defecating, that's the worry, the big worry, because in that hold down suit, there's a trap in the back, but still, I mean, you're hanging out if you have to. So one of the Western guys, because some of the guys had Western guides as climbers, as clients, they were Western guides were taking them up, and one of the Western guides, somebody was asking it at that point we're all in the same mess tent, and he said, "I tell you what, take these 2 blue pills, you won't have to worry." And somebody said, "Well, what are they?" I said, "Just take them." I did. That was Camp 2, and then Camp 3, Camp 4, the summit, Camp 4, back to Camp 2. Then I finally had to go again. It was it clogged me up good, which was good. So I never had to test that little drop seat in the back. Yeah, because water and or electrolytes, some kind of. For me, water. I do. I mean, a lot of times I'll mix it and make it really weak, R8 or something like that. But yeah, some of them were. I mean, there were some of our guys that they had powder they put in every drink they did. For me, I prefer water unless I just felt like I need a little more electrolytes.
Are there any other heat sources to help with frostbite outside of base camp?
Yeah, base camp is really it as far as both the emergency room tent, as well as any heaters or something like that, or warm up. You can warm water, of course, and put your fingers in there and slowly warm them back up. In my case, it turns out, I mean, my thumbs didn't, but all 8 other digits ended up blistering up on the tips, and then eventually turned black and sloughed off. But they're fine now. I mean, they're very sensitive. I've climbed a couple mountains since, high mountains, and really, really sensitive. But that was really the only remaining difficulty.
Mentally, how did you think about descending after your ascent?
Even though I had it on that next to or third to last slide that getting the top is optional, getting down is mandatory, that was a mantra I had the whole time. I never let that, because I knew, I mean, somebody will probably ask this, so I hate to steal your question, but yeah, there's bodies along the way. And you see them, and you're looking, you think, that guy had the same determination, the same motivation, the same that I do, but there he is, or she is. And, so you have to deal with that psychologically, but I also, that kind of makes you aware, like, okay, I've got to get back down, so have I got enough to get down? And I had just enough, as you could tell. My reservoir was depleted. This was the one thing that absolutely blew my mind. As you know, no light pollution. Okay? So we're climbing through the night on summit day, and we're high, and so you can see to the horizon, which is below you, because all the peak is so prominent. So it appears in your mind you're looking down at stars, because there's stars all the way to the horizon, but you're up here, and a couple of times I'm like, what? Those got to be headlights. No, those are stars down there. But you're not looking down. I mean, that's the optical illusion you're getting, is that you're looking down at stars, because they go the whole canopy of stars with no light pollution. It hit me first on the summit ridge when I thought, I'm going to summit Everest. I mean, and literally, I started, my heart started racing. I'm like, oh, calm down, Doug, calm down. But what also had happened, I didn't realize, is my oxygen regulator had frozen. So I wasn't getting the oxygen. So I'm like, oh, and Finjo says, oh, Doug, hang on. And he holds this side, and then all this ice sprinkles out. Oh, that's much better. Oh, that's better. But that's when I got very emotional that last 100 meters, just thinking, oh my gosh. But then when I was there, it's like, oh, I'm so tired. That's why one of the reasons I was sitting down. So tired, I got to get down. So pictures, spread ashes, flag, let's go down.
So at the pace that you are taking steps, how do you get anywhere with how long it takes?
That's why it took literally because the Hillary step took a lot out of me. My heart rate got up, a lot of energy. So when I crested there, and you can see the top, and that's why it took me an hour for the last 300 feet, essentially, because it's just one step and breathe until like, okay, I can do another one, and breathe.
That's true. You just take
One step.
and you breathe.
3 or 4 or 5 times, yeah, just to get enough oxygen in, because I mean, you're at that point, you know, there's not many oxygen molecules out there. They're all spread way out.
Up to the Hillary step.
Up the Hillary step, I was pretty steady, and that's why Finjo, I think, was, you know, thinking, hey, you're going to make it. And I was like, yeah, I think so. And then Hillary said, well, maybe I'm not.
So the question was about the Earth cache. When did you answer the questions?
Yeah, I confess, I didn't even answer them until I was back in Kathmandu, because I didn't have internet service. But I did write some notes when I got to Camp 2 to think, okay, don't forget, I got to go to the... And then I got back down and answered the questions and got it in.
It was the Sherpa, the Kenyansherpa.
Kenyansherpa is another story, that name. But Finjo is from a village called Fortsey. Less than 300 people live there. Again, Lindsay and Karen have been there, had the pleasure of going there. And of the 300 people that live there, there's like 92 of them have summited Everest, that village. And that includes men, women, children. Yeah, so it's a huge population base. And yeah, and I was Kenyansherpa before I met Kenyansherpa.
Yeah, is every hike that you do now in Colorado easy?
No. And you guys know this. There are no easy 14ers. I mean, come on. You know, the weather, there's so many options out there. You know, people always say, what's the easiest 14er? It's like, well, there's no easy ones, but some are easier. But the same thing. I mean, it's lovely being out there. It's beautiful. And I enjoy every moment of it. So, yeah, there's no regret of, you know, saying, oh, I'm just in Colorado now. We are so fortunate to live here. Absolutely.
Oh, did you see though, cash in, trash out?
That is actually a brilliant question, because I forgot to mention in that 35,000, 2,500 of that is a deposit you have to put down. And when you go into the national park, Sagarmatha they call it, is what they call the Mount Everest in Nepal, Sagarmatha National Park. They weigh all your gear and they log it down. When you come out, they weigh all your gear and if it's the same or more, you get the 2,500 back. So it was very motivating. And so, yes, I just eat a bunch, but I'm glad to lead into this, because people always say, oh, it's a trash heap. Well, in 2013, on the trek in, base camp, all the way up to 1, 2, and 3 camps, I mean, you might see like somebody lost a candy bar wrapper and it blew off somewhere. And I saw a couple old tin cans, and I said, of course, that's Hillary's and Tenzing's, but no, you know, that were in the glacier that had finally, you know, flushed out. But there was, I mean, it was amazingly clean. Now, from Camp 4 and above, it's not, because you can't get that stuff out of there. And so old tents and oxygen bottles that people left are now frozen into the ground, and the bodies, of course, and things like that. I haven't been up that high since then, but I heard that after the earthquake in 2015, that a lot of tents got wiped out at Camp 2 and Camp 1, and so now and Camp 3, and so now they also, and they're trying to pull those down, because those they can get down safely, but from Camp 4 and up, it's just too dangerous to ask somebody to try to sea tow at that level, yeah.
When you enter the death zone, what time limit do you have?
It depends, again, on your own physiological makeup. Some people are more blessed than others. People have summited Everest without oxygen, less than 200 of them, but there are some superhumans out there that have done that. So you can do that if you're, again, way beyond me. But normally they want you up and down in 24 hours. That's why you don't stay at Camp 4 on the way down. But I just knew from a safety standpoint I couldn't make the Lhotse face, so we had to spend one extra night. But we had oxygen, so that I felt good about that. And that's what I was going to say about the Sherpa. I got sidetracked. And what happens is the Sherpas will walk to their death, unfortunately. If the Westerner says, no, we're going to the top, I don't care what the weather is, I don't care what the condition, we're going, the Sherpa will just go. And a lot of them have died that way because they won't dispute. So it was my decision, not Finjo's, even though he was advising me. I said, Finjo, we have to. And he says, okay, Doug, we do it. Florida base camp, 2 nights. Yeah, I went to Camp 2, spent the night, went through the ice fall to base camp, spent 1 night, grabbed all my gear, and only 4 days to hike out versus 10 to come in. Of course, you're going downhill mainly, although Karen and Lindsay know it's up and downhill. But you're getting, the oxygen is feeling good. You're getting a lot of oxygen down there. Yeah, Sherpas have multiple, and a few Westerners have done multiple. But when I was there, just since you're a numbers guy, there were a couple numbers that were fresh in my mind. One, I was the 363rd American to summit. And at that time, the 3rd oldest American. Now there's a couple more guys. I'm not the 6th oldest now, I think. I'm still the oldest one-eyed guy. But anyway, no, that's my one claim to fame. But there's almost, I think it's like 4,000 plus different individuals that have summited. Some have done multiple summits. So I think there's like 10,000 summits, but a lot of those Sherpas have multiple, of course. Right. And that's both sides, Tibet and Nepal. Out of, the billions, yeah. Wow. It's a small club.
Yeah, were there places you felt like giving up?
Absolutely. I mean, there's, again, in life, in all our endeavors, there's always points where it's like, if it's a job, if it's a relationship, if it's a task, whatever, it's like, okay, I'm just giving this up. But then I would go back to, why am I here? Do I really, really want to do this? And is it possible that I can? And it's like, well, I don't know, but I know I can get to Camp 3. All right, we'll go to Camp 3, and then we'll reassess. Okay, I can get to Camp 4. We'll reassess. So it's a matter of breaking it down into those small steps. And there were plenty of times when, especially going through the ice fall, because it's just like, nerve-wracking to go through it. The first time through, it took me over 7 hours to get through there. The last time it was 5.5, so you get better. You get a learning curve.
So what was the Earth Cache answer?
I can't remember. Yeah, unfortunately, one of them is you have to have a picture of yourself on the summit. Yeah, it was talking about the seafloor, coming up.
How many groups go up each season?
Another great question. It used to be they would only allow 1 team on the mountain at a time. And then in the early 90s, Nepal realized, wait a minute, we can make a lot of money on this. So they started letting multiple teams. But even through the 90s, it would only be 2 or 3. If you've read Into Thin Air, where there were like 4 different groups, 2 of which got into big trouble on the mountain during that time. Now there's 15 or 20 companies, maybe even 30, 40, counting some of the small Nepalese, because the Nepalese, will say, hey, look, if you pay, we'll get you there. But that's a bad proposition. There's too many on the mountain that are not. And this is another, let me get one more editorial in here. You'll see a picture, it's from 2012, and it's from Camp 3 going up to that Geneva Spur, and it's a line of people all on the fixed line trying to get up. And every time they have a special on Everest, every time somebody has an article, they show that damn picture. And it's like, 2013, I think, and it's more crowded now, but at least in 2013 for sure. Now, one of the reasons is we left earlier than anybody else, but we were alone way more than we were around people. I mean, it is a massive mountain, and we would be alone, they would catch up, there'd be a few. So, and the other thing in 2012, and again it happened in 2019, there were only 3 days of summit windows possible. And so everybody went on those 3 days. We had 9 days during our season, so it got spread a little more, and we had less people. So yeah, not as crowded as that one picture depicts, unfortunately.
So have you had trouble setting goals after achieving Everest?
Not really, because there's all kinds of things out there and a lot of kinds of goals. And the one thing after I did Everest, and Steve knows this well, is I started, there's a thing called the 7 Summits, which is the highest point on each continent. I thought, okay, I've gotten Everest, so maybe I should go back. And I'd done Kilimanjaro, Aconcagua, so South America, Africa, Asia, so maybe I should go back. And so, so I went after that for a while, and I gave myself, I'll take one shot at each, because they're expensive too, and time away from family and all that, and I made 6 of the 7.
Would you do it again?
If I could, I would do the north side. Just because it's different, just because Maori and Irvine, that whole mystique. And I've been to the North Col on the north side, so I've been part of the way up. So I'd do it from the north side, but I'm not doing it again.
Is the reason you didn't leave it traditional because you could not maintain it?
No. But again, again, in this crowd, I know it's tough, but it was very down the list of, make sure you get the earth cache logged. Yeah. But it's actually come in handy since, because, anytime somebody has an elevation thing, it's like, oh yeah, I can qualify.
Yeah.
So when we went back, Karen and Lindsay and I and another group, we trekked in, and in Finjo's village, we put a cache at his tea house. And that's when I went, there was one lower down between Lukla and Namche. There was the one at Namche, there was Kalapatar, and then the Everest. That was it. Now there's a handful more, and they're usually at tea houses where you just go in and say, hey. And they go, oh yeah, here, sign here. By the way, you want to buy a meal? Yeah. Or have some tea.
When did the Sherpa go on oxygen?
I don't think he ever had to, but from a safety standpoint and clear thinking, he knew that he should. So he went on when we started summit night. He didn't even sleep on it at 26,000. When we started climbing on summit night, the first time I saw him in an oxygen mask, I'm like, Finjo was 42 when we climbed. Yeah, that's why he's only done a couple of weeks trying to get away from it. It's the most lucrative thing they can do. Again, someone asked the question, it's $5,000 for the Sherpa for those 2 months, which is 10 times the annual wage of an average Nepalese at that time. So it's huge money for him, but it's also very dangerous. And of course, I gave him a very generous tip, and then we sponsor his son. So there's other benefits. And we've been back, and we did nicely by him. And actually, these ladies have helped sponsor children in Nepal as well. So yeah.
How long did it take to acclimate physically and psychologically?
Oh,
when you
Okay.
came back?
So we had a good coming home story. So June 1st, I left on May 31st, and it took forever, and finally get on June 1st after midnight into Denver. Susie meets me at the airport, my wife, and says, look, it's late. I don't want to drive to Colorado Springs, and you're in no shape to drive to Colorado Springs. So I got us this hotel room. It's really old. It's really tired. It's not. I said, sweetheart, does it have a door on the room? She goes, well, yeah, of course it does. I said, so I don't have to get on my hands and knees and crawl? No, what are you talking about? I said, does it have a bed? Yes. Okay, and I don't have to have a sleeping bag? Okay, I'll be fine. Yeah. So anyway, but physically, it took me at least 6 months. I couldn't run. At that time, I was a big runner. Now I'm not, but I was then. Or any kind of endurance exercise, it took me a full 6 months to get to where I felt like I could actually be back to my normal self. And then psychologically was quicker. It was kind of unreal at first, and it's like it starts to sink in. Then I started giving talks like these, and then, yeah. So it was quicker psychologically. Karen and Lindsay, stand up. They've been to base camp. They've been to 18,000 feet. Steve Martin, please stand up, Steve. Steve has climbed the one summit I haven't of the 7, Denali, that's why his name is Denali, and physically, it's harder than Everest.
Thank you, Doug. This has been a fantastic presentation
Thank you.
on your part. I'm just so excited about being here and hearing my friends talk through all of this stuff. I've also been a mountaineer since 1962, and wanted to climb the 7 summits. I simply couldn't afford Vincent Massif at Antarctica and Everest. But when I was 63, I made my first attempt on Denali. I'd climbed the other 5 or 4 at that time, and we went up the West Rib, which is a very, very challenging climb. We were the only party on Denali that year to try the West Rib, and we got on summit day into the Orient Express, and it was extreme high avalanche danger. We had to turn back after 18 days on the Rib. It was just awful mentally to have to turn around, but it was incredibly dangerous. The Orient Express is named that because there have been 2 parties from Japan who have gone into the Orient Express when avalanche danger has been high, and they all perished. And to get to the West Rib, you go up something called the northeast fork of the Kahiltna, the Valley of Death, and that's a valley of a big glacier, the northeast fork of the Kahiltna, and it has ice falls like Everest, and there have been huge ice seracs on the Kahiltna peaks just to the south of the route. And these ice seracs come down from time to time, and there have been 2 parties that have been in the valley going up these glaciers when ice seracs have come down, and they've never been heard of since. A very, very dangerous route. 2 years later, I was 65 at the time, some of us tried again, and we ran into terrible weather at 14,300 feet. We were there for 11 days with raging winds and 40 below zero weather before the weather cleared, and there were 6 of us. 3 of us went to the summit. 3 others went down. They'd had enough of Denali and 2 expeditions, and as Doug has said, mind over matter. You've got to have tremendous willpower, and we made it on the only possible summit day over the next month to the summit. The rangers had suggested we wait another day, and we would not have made it if we had waited that day because 80 or 90 mile an hour winds came up. One last point on this. I grew up in Wisconsin and did a lot of climbing in the Tetons and Wind Rivers and Colorado in the 1960s, and a very close friend of mine, Dennis Luchterhand, went to Denali in 67, and that was the year, if you read the book Denali Howl, which is an incredible book about that expedition. There were 7 people who were killed on that expedition in Denali, and my good friend Dennis was one of them. Yeah. But this climbing is something. I'm 81 now, and I can't give it up. and Doug can't give it up. I mean, the last time I was on a high peak was with Doug and with Brad, and I'm looking forward to getting out with them on many more. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right. Any last questions?
0.05.
Yeah. How much was the earth cache a part of your motivation?
Yeah. Now, seriously, I mean, I knew it was there, and I knew, okay, if I get there, of course, I have to have a picture on the top with my suit on, and then you have to have a picture lower down in the same suit, because some people have tried to Photoshop their way in, and obviously that doesn't work. So I said, if I get there, I'll do the necessary things, but it was low on the priority list, to be honest. And sorry, cashers.
Did you petition headquarters for a new terrain rating?
The one on the Tibet on the north side, the second highest, is a 4.5. At 21,900 feet. It's like, whatever.
Yeah. Were the Olympic athletes that you were working with inspired?
someone asked about the psychological part. Part of it was when I came back, I ended up giving, almost every week I was giving a talk, mainly to the teams, the athletes and the teams, but even the staff and others, and then some corporations and schools and scout troops, churches, whatever. But anyway, almost all the athletes, well, all the ones at the training center, and then ones that would come in for camps, I would usually get asked to do a talk to them, because it blends in so perfectly what they do. They have to have this huge goal that only a handful of people in the world ever meet, and they have to work their entire competitive life to try to get there. And for a minute and a half, they listen to the national anthem, but it's the 12 to 15 years to get there, not the minute and a half on the podium, that is the real victory.
Yeah, so how many people have done Colorado 14ers? Gosh.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome.
Good job,
Oh, how many people have done Rainier? Okay,
Steve. Yeah.
3.
It's the best mountain, and Steve can argue with me not, but it's the best glaciated mountain in the lower 48, personal opinion. Steve? Yeah. Yeah. It's a beautiful, fantastic mountain.
Any other questions? When is your book out?
I go with these. Thank you very much. You were a great audience. Thank you.